My name is Emily Rowe. I am 79 years old. And even now, after all these decades, I can still hear the creak of that bathroom door. It was summer 1961. I was 15, a girl caught between childhood and womanhood, learning to live in a house that had never really felt like mine. The bathroom was the only place I thought I could be alone. The one place where I could lock the door, run hot water, and let the steam cover me like a blanket. But that day, I learned that even a locked door doesn't keep out betrayal. I had just stepped out of the tub, steam clinging to the mirror, when I heard it, the slow, deliberate squeak of the doorknob turning. My heart jumped. I'd locked it, I knew I had. I turned quickly, water dripping down my back, and froze. The door wasn't opening all the way. Just a sliver. Just enough for someone to look through. And in that narrow crack I saw him. Carl Rowe. My stepfather. As I, watching. For a moment the world tilted. My stomach lurched, my breath caught, and the towel in my hand slipped to the floor. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. My entire body turned to stone as the truth sank in. He wasn't passing by, he wasn't knocking. He was watching. I lunged forward, slamming my palm against the door. It shut with a thud, and I fumbled with the lock, my hands trembling. "Emily!" His voice drawled from the hallway, calm, casual, as if he hadn't just stolen something from me I could never get back. "You all right in there?" My voice cracked when I answered. "Go away." I heard his footsteps retreat, slow and steady, down the hall. I stood there, dripping, shaking, staring at the door as if it might open again. My skin crawled, my chest heaved. I wanted to disappear. When I finally pulled myself together enough to leave, I ran straight to my mother. She was in the kitchen, folding laundry. Her lipstick perfect even though she hadn't left the house all day. The smell of starch and detergent mixed with the faint sweetness of iced tea on the counter. She looked up as I burst in, her brows knitting together. "What on earth, Emily?" Could barely breathe. He was watching me. Through the bathroom door. I locked it and he pushed it open. The words tumbled out of me, frantic, desperate, my hands trembling as I tried to make her see. But she didn't. Her eyes narrowed. She set the folded towel down, her movements slow, precise, deliberate. Then she straightened and smoothed the front of her blouse. "Emily," she said, her voice low and sharp, "do you know what you're accusing him of?" I nodded furiously, tears welling. "I saw him, Mama. I saw his eye right there." "Stop." The word cut like glass. She stepped closer, her perfume sharp, her face hard. "Carl is my husband. He's a good man. Do you understand me? Good man. You're imagining things. I'm not." My voice cracked. "Mama, please, you have to believe me." Her hand shot out and grabbed my wrist, her grip tight enough to hurt. Her eyes bored into mine, steel beneath the painted lashes. "Listen to me, Emily. Don't you dare spread lies. Don't you dare shame this family. People talk in this town. You want to ruin us. You want to ruin me." My mouth fell open. I stared at her, waiting for softness, for comfort, for any flicker of the mother I thought I had. But there was none. She let go of my wrist and turned back to the laundry. "Carl works hard. He gives us a good life. He loves you like his own. Don't you ever repeat this again. Do you hear me?" I stood frozen in the doorway, tears spilling down my cheeks, my voice stuck in my throat. She didn't believe me. Worse, she chose not to. I backed out of the kitchen, my chest burning, my mind spinning. Upstairs, I heard Carl's footsteps again, steady, deliberate. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the shadows on the plaster swimming. I replayed the moment over and over. The crack in the door, his eye, my mother's voice calling me a liar. The two people who were supposed to protect me had destroyed me instead. One with his watching. The other with her silence. I turned my face into the pillow and sobbed until my throat ached. And then, somewhere in the blur of tears and fear, another feeling began to rise. Not just hurt, not just shame, something sharper. Promise. If she wouldn't believe me, I would make sure everyone else did. One day I thought, one day I'll make the whole town see. Before we move on, take a second to hit subscribe and drop a comment. I'd love to hear what you think so far. People like to say you can spot trouble a mile away. That monsters have sharp teeth, glowing eyes, or shadows that follow them wherever they go. But in my experience, the most dangerous monsters look perfectly ordinary. They smile, they shake hands, they mow the lawn on Saturdays. A charm. Carl Rowe was one of those. I was 9 when my mother remarried. My father had died in a car accident when I was just a toddler, so I had no real memories of him. Only faded photographs and the hushed way my mother's voice softened when she spoke his name. For years it was just the two of us. And then Carl arrived. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a smile that seemed to put everyone at ease. People in town called him Steady Carl. He worked at the hardware store, always knew how to fix a leaky pipe or a loose shutter. To neighbors he was reliable. To my mother he was salvation. "Emily," she told me the night she introduced him, smoothing her skirt nervously. "Carl's a good man. He'll take care of us." First I wanted to believe her. I wanted a father figure. Someone to walk me to school, someone to clap at my recitals, someone to make us whole again. Carl knew how to play that part. He brought me peppermint sticks when he came over. He asked about my homework, ruffled my hair, called me kiddo. At dinner, he bowed his head in prayer, thanking God for the blessing of family. And my mother glowed. For the first time since my father's death, I saw her laugh easily. She dressed better, wore lipstick every day, held her head higher when she walked into town. She seemed lighter, as if Carl had lifted something heavy from her shoulders. But even then the cracks were there. The first time I noticed was small. I was playing with dolls in the living room when I felt his eyes on me. Not in the way a father watches his child, but in a way that made my stomach squirm. His gaze lingered too long. When I looked up, he smiled and winked like it was our little secret. I told myself I imagined it. Another time, he passed by as I sat reading, his hand brushing my shoulder. It was casual, too casual, the kind of touch that made me pull away without knowing why. At dinner, when neighbors visited, he was charming. "Emily's the smartest girl in her class," he'd brag, patting my back. My mother would beam, proud and grateful. But I noticed how tightly his hand pressed when he patted me. By 11, I'd grown uneasy around him. I avoided being alone in the same room. I learned to time my showers for when he was out fixing things in the garage. I told myself I was paranoid. After all, my mother adored him. Everyone did. And that was the second crack. My mother's blindness. Diane Rowe was a woman who clung to reputation like a lifeline. She grew up poor, embarrassed by her family's name. Marrying my father had lifted her, but his sudden death left her adrift. When Carl came along with his clean shirts and steady job, he became her second chance. She built her world around keeping him, no matter what it cost. She ironed his shirts until the creases were sharp enough to cut. She baked pies for the neighbors to show what a perfect homemaker she was. She smiled at church, arm linked in his, as if the past tragedies of her life had been erased. And if Carl said something, my mother believed it. If I forgot to clean my room and he told her I was lazy, she scolded me harshly. If I said I didn't like the way he stared, she called me over-dramatic. "Carl is a good man, Emily," she would say, as though repeating it enough times would make it true. "Don't ruin this for us." By 13 I understood. My mother loved Carl more than she loved the truth. And that's what made the bathroom door betrayal cut so deep. Because when I finally ran to her, desperate, trembling, begging for her to believe me, she didn't. She couldn't. Her life depended on the illusion. She needed Carl to be good, and she needed me to be quiet. That night, after she called me a liar, I lay awake listening. The house creaked, the pipes rattled, and I could hear their voices drifting down the hallway. My mother's soft, adoring laugh. Carl's deep rumble of satisfaction. I curled tighter into myself, the covers pulled to my chin, and realized that the people closest to me were the ones most dangerous. The cracks in our family weren't cracks anymore. They were canyons. And I was falling. Still, even then, in the middle of that darkness, something stubborn in me refused to break. I thought of my mother's hand gripping my wrist, her voice whispering, "Don't shame this family." And in the silence of my room I whispered back, "One day, Mama. One day I'll shame you both." Before we go any further, click subscribe and let me know in the comments. What would you have done in my shoes? 4 years after that day, I carried silence like a stone in my chest. It pressed on me every time I tried to laugh, every time I tried to speak the truth. I learned quickly that in my house, silence wasn't just expected, it was demanded. Carl went on as if nothing had happened. He smiled at neighbors, joked with the grocer, tipped his hat at church. In public, he was the image of respectability. At home, his presence filled every corner like a shadow. The squeak of the floorboards outside my bedroom door at night, the way his eyes lingered too long when no one was looking, they reminded me daily of what he had done, and what he thought he could get away with. And my mother. She played her part with perfection. She wore pearls to church, hosted luncheons, kept the house spotless. When anyone asked, she called Carl a good man, her voice bright with pride. But when her eyes flicked to me, sharp and unyielding, I knew what she was really saying. "Don't you dare ruin this for me." 15, I felt powerless. At 17, I still carried the weight of it. But by 20, something in me had shifted. I realized I wasn't powerless. I wasn't voiceless. Not forever. If my mother wouldn't believe me, if Carl thought he could hide behind his reputation, then I would find a way to make sure the whole town saw what they had buried. The first thing I did was write. It started as scribbles in notebooks. Memories, details, every moment I could recall with precision. The bathroom door. The creak of the knob. His eye staring through the crack. My mother's grip on my wrist. Her words calling me a liar. I wrote it down again and again until the paper tore beneath the ink. Then I began saving. Newspaper clippings. Records of Carl's job at the hardware store. Notes about his routines, his friends, his weaknesses. People trusted him, but people also gossiped. I collected whispers, tucked them away like currency. The second step was patience. Waited. I smiled when I had to, nodded when people mentioned how lucky we were to have a man like Carl in our lives. I played the role of dutiful daughter, but beneath the mask, I sharpened my resolve. I studied the way small-town reputations worked. Everyone cared about appearances. Everyone cared about what was said out loud, what was whispered at potlucks, what was shared at festivals. Truth in a diary might mean nothing. Truth spoken in the right place at the right time where no one could look away. That was power. I realized my revenge had to be public. Not whispered to 1 or 2 people. Not confided in friends who might doubt me. No, I would stand where the whole town could see. And I would strip away the illusion my mother and stepfather had built. The third step was building allies. Didn't happen all at once. First I tested the waters. With a cousin, I hinted at the way Carl watched me too closely. Her eyes widened, but she said nothing. A year later, she confessed she'd felt it too. The weight of his stare, the discomfort she couldn't explain. Then it was a neighbor, Mrs. Fletcher, who once asked me quietly why I looked so pale when Carl entered the room. I didn't tell her everything, but I saw the doubt spark in her eyes, the crack in the image Carl projected. Piece by piece, I gathered not just evidence but people. People who suspected. People who had seen shadows they hadn't wanted to name. The fourth step was waiting for the right stage. Every year our town held a summer festival. A celebration of community, of small-town pride. Booths line the main street, selling pies and handmade crafts. Children played games for prizes. And at the end, in front of everyone, the town gathered for speeches, awards, and acknowledgments. Carl loved that festival. He always volunteered, always stood at the microphone, always made himself visible. My mother preened beside him, her arm linked in his, basking in the glow of being seen as the perfect couple. It was their pride, their shield. And it would be the place I destroyed them. The year I turned 21, I knew the time had come. I had my words ready. My notes, my journals, my memory sharpened into a weapon. I had allies. Not many, but enough. People who had whispered to me that they too had seen things, that they too believed. I imagined it over and over. The crowd gathered, the speeches beginning, Carl smiling that smug smile. And then me, stepping forward, tearing it all apart with the truth they had buried for years. Every night leading up to the festival I practiced. I spoke to the mirror, my voice trembling at first, then steadying with each repetition. I practiced not crying, not faltering, not letting anger overtake me. I wanted precision. I wanted power. By the morning of the festival I was ready. I slipped my journals into a bag, tucked the copies of statements from others who had suspected into folders, and walked into town with my head high. The streets buzzed with laughter and chatter, the air thick with the smell of popcorn and barbecue. Children ran with balloons, women haggled over pies, men slapped each other on the back. And at the center of it all, Carl stood tall, shaking hands, smiling, basking in admiration. Margaret stood beside him, her pearls gleaming, her smile perfect. And me. I blended into the crowd, silent for now, my heart pounding. I wasn't ready to speak yet. But I would be. When Carl stepped onto that stage to boast about family values and community strength, I would rise. I would cut through his lies. I would make the whole town believe me. And when I pictured his face crumbling, my mother's composure shattering, I felt for the first time not fear but power. Because I had carried their silence long enough. Now it was my turn to make them listen. The summer festival always drew the whole town. That year the square buzzed with life. Strings of lights swayed above the booths, children darted between games, and the smell of fried dough hung in the warm air. Families gathered in clusters, waving at each other, laughing, catching up. I walked through it all like a ghost with a heartbeat too loud. Every face I passed, every smile I saw, I thought, tonight you'll know. Tonight you'll see them for who they are. Carl was in his element. He shook hands with the mayor, clapped old friends on the back, tossed coins to kids running by. People leaned toward him when he spoke, laughing at his jokes, nodding at his stories. My mother floated beside him, pearls at her throat, her smile tight and practiced. To anyone watching, they were a picture of respectability. But I knew the truth. And tonight everyone else would too. As dusk settled, the crowd gathered near the makeshift stage by the gazebo. Wooden benches and folding chairs filled quickly, people fanning themselves against the lingering heat. Lanterns glowed along the pathways, casting golden light on eager faces. Carl climbed the stage, microphone in hand, his voice booming. Ladies and gentlemen, neighbors and friends, what a blessing it is to stand here among you all. This town is built on family, trust, and hard work. And it is my honor. His words blurred. My pulse thundered in my ears. My hands trembled against the folder clutched to my chest. This was the moment. I rose. Stop. My voice wasn't loud at first, but the crowd hushed anyway. Heads turned. Carl froze mid-sentence, blinking at me in surprise. I stepped forward, my heart pounding, my knees weak but steadying with every step. You want to talk about family and trust? I said louder this time, my voice carrying across the benches. Then let's tell them what really happens inside your house. The crowd gasped. My mother's smile cracked, her eyes widening. Carl's face darkened, a flicker of panic in his eyes before he plastered on a grin. "Emily," he said smoothly, "this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," I cut in. I climbed onto the edge of the stage, folder in hand, and turned to the crowd. When I was 15, Carl watched me through the bathroom door. I locked it. I heard the knob turn. I saw his eyes staring at me through the crack. And when I told my mother, she called me a liar. She told me not to shame the family. She told me to keep quiet. A stunned silence fell. The weight of it pressed on every face, everybody leaning forward. I opened the folder and pulled out copies of my journal entries, my handwriting shaky but clear. I read them aloud. Dates, details, words that had haunted me for decades. June 5, 1961. Carl watched me through the bathroom door. Told Mama. She grabbed my wrist and said, "Don't you dare shame this family." Gasps rippled through the crowd. People shifted uncomfortably. I saw Mrs. Fletcher in the third row cover her mouth with her hand, eyes wide. Carl's voice rose, strained now. "This is nonsense. She's confused, she." "No, I'm not." My voice sharpened. I held up letters from neighbors and cousins who had confided in me over the years, whispers they hadn't dared to say out loud until now. Others saw the way he stared. Others felt it too. You all looked away because it was easier. Because you didn't want to ruin the illusion. I turned to my mother, her face pale, her pearls gleaming under the lantern light. "And you chose him over me. You chose lies over truth. You called me a liar, but I was the only one telling the truth." The crowd erupted in murmurs, whispers spreading like wildfire. Carl's face was flushed red, sweat beading at his temples. He stepped forward, pointing at me, his voice shaking. "You're ungrateful. After everything I've done." "Done for who?" I snapped, my voice cracking through the night. "You didn't build this town. You built a prison out of silence. And tonight I've torn it down." I dropped the folder onto the podium, papers scattering across the wood. Evidence lay open, undeniable. The mayor stood slowly, his face grave. "Carl," he said, his voice heavy, disappointment clear. Neighbors who had cheered Carl minutes before now looked at him with narrowed eyes, whispers rising louder. "Did you hear?" "You saw him." She wrote it down. Margaret knew. Margaret clutched her pearls, her lips trembling. For the first time her composure broke. She reached for Carl's arm, but he pulled away, his face twisted in fury and shame. I stepped down from the stage, my heart hammering, my legs weak. The crowd parted for me, eyes wide, mouths murmuring. For once, they weren't looking away. They weren't choosing silence. Behind me, I heard voices rising, questions thrown at Carl, demands shouted at my mother. Their image, their peace, shattered in a single night. And me. I walked out into the cool night air, the stars sharp above me, my chest lighter than it had been in years. Because I had kept my promise. I had made them all believe. They thought silence would bury me. My stepfather thought reputation would protect him. My mother thought calling me a liar would erase the truth. But lies rot in the dark, and truth finds a way to burn through. I was 15 when they silenced me. I was 39 when I finally told the world. And when the town believed me, the silence that had haunted me all my life died right there, under the festival lights. So remember this. Keeping the peace is not the same as keeping the truth. One day, silence always breaks. If this story moved you, if you believe voices like mine should never be buried, then join me here. Subscribe to the channel, share these stories, and help keep the truth louder than silence.